Agatha Christie is the most sold murder mystery writer in history, with over 2 billion copies of her books sold. This is the formula I've found she uses in her books and why it works. The entire point of making a murder mystery is to stump the readers, and once you've found a way to do that, wouldn't it make sense that you'd keep doing it again? Every mystery writer has their own version of this formula, be it Sherlock Holmes or Nancy Drew, and then there's Agatha Christie. Obviously, there's more to a mystery than a formula, but that's what we're going to be going over, what the most sold formula is and why it works. Fair warning, this is the actual formula that she does use in most of her books. It probably won't spoil the books for you if you don't want it to, but you'll now be aware that it's there, so if you don't want any chance of spoilers, this video isn't for you. The actual pattern Agatha Christie uses is fairly simple. It can be summed up in the simple common trope, the double bluff. Essentially, this is how an Agatha Christie book works. She introduces the main few suspects, the detective, and then everyone else. One thing Agatha Christie does that Sherlock Holmes doesn't do is introduce all the main suspects at the beginning. It's never going to be one of the later people who shows up who's the murderer. This is one of the things that makes Agatha Christie books feel more fair than a Sherlock Holmes book would, even though it isn't. After introducing everyone and getting to know them a little better, it becomes more clear who the majority of the evidence is pointing at. This could be physical evidence or the person with the most compelling motive and the most suspicious behavior. She'll lead you to half suspect it's them for most of the book, while at the same time making you think it can't be that obvious. About 3/4 of the way through the book, some giant new piece of evidence is revealed. This piece of evidence is there to prove that the person you've been sort of suspecting couldn't be the murderer. It's meant to force you to cross them off their list in a self-satisfied sort of way to make you think, yeah, I thought it couldn't be them. It was too obvious. Now that the reader is satisfied with themselves, they're not even going to consider that this person could be the murderer anymore. They'll become sort of a side character. That's why it's so surprising when at the end of the book, the detective reveals it was that person the entire time. The formula is slightly more complicated than that. It varies depending on the setting and the people introduced, but for most Poirot and Miss Marple mysteries, this is the basic strategy she uses. The best example of this strategy is in the book Hickory Dickory Dock. This was, for me, the easiest Agatha Christie book to solve. It was very clearly showcasing the formula. This is actually the book that I realized there was a pattern throughout all of her books in. So if you'd like to go analyze the pattern for yourself, I would recommend picking up Hickory Dickory Dock. It's one of her older mysteries with Poirot as the detective. If you don't have time to read an entire book, you can understand the gist of how it works with the short story, Witness for the Prosecution. Even with the formula, every Agatha Christie book is different and unique. They all tweak the formula slightly, and even when they don't, the characters are so charismatic and convincing that you find yourself doubting whether or not you were right, even if you knew the answer beforehand. Because even if you know the answer, once she proves it can't be who it actually is, we all immediately dismiss them. Even if we try to keep them in mind, they shift from being the primary suspect to a background character. Her evidence is just that convincing. Agatha Christie is the queen of red herrings. That's why her formula works. She hands you indisputable evidence that it can't be who it really is. And it's extra tricky because this formula can't tell you how the person was murdered or why, it can only tell you who. So yes, it's a pattern that appears often, but her books are still fresh every time because everything else about the mysteries is different every time. That's why the Agatha Christie formula works. Not only does the formula itself play on your expectations, even figuring out doesn't guarantee that you'll understand the book before the reveal. There's a couple exceptions out of the 40 books she's written. 2 of my favorite books, The Murder of Roger Ackroyd and Then There Were None, follow an entirely different formula. Agatha Christie was known to switch around who the murderer was as she was writing, so not all of her books are the same, but the vast majority do use the double bluff. Whether you're a reader, someone who is just interested in how this worked, or a writer, I hope this was informative and interesting. If this video does well, I'll be back with more analyses of things. Bye!